Over the last few years, we've successfully helped 6 men get off testosterone replacement therapy. We've also optimized men's free T, not just serum, but free T, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and a few guys in their 60s as well. So you're never too late to get this right. So every 2 hours, your body can make the precursor, LH, to make testosterone. And what it is, the system that we put together, there's 4 layers. And I'm going to walk you through them now. The biggest takeaway is that layer one must be dialed in, then layer two, and then layer three. Now, layer four is when you're going to be feeling quite spectacular. So, this is going to be a 4-part series. I'm going to release one every Saturday. This is Australian time. And during midweek, I'm going to release another smaller one. So, this video, probably 40 minutes, could be 60 minutes. We'll just see how we go. Now, a lot of people, they're probably here, got a few symptoms, spinning their wheels, and you could be over here too. So I've got a solution for both. But this is where you want to be, and it's not difficult to get there. It is pretty simple, and these are the 4 layers. The caveat, it's not going to happen overnight. If you're over here, it's going to take longer. If you're over here, could be 6 weeks, could be 12 weeks. But let me tell you, when you get there, it's pretty clear sailing because it's burnt into your brain. You know exactly what you need to do each and every day. Rinse, repeat. Now, that's me, 54. I've been doing this for quite some time. And that was last year, February 2, 2025. And that was me, December 3, 2025. And I've maintained that. And I'm not counting calories. Now, as I mentioned over here, NADPH, well, I didn't actually say it yet, but this is the most underrated molecule that your body needs. Anabolic reactions. Enough said. And beyond that, this is also what it's doing for you. Like we're talking detox, liver detox over here. And this one here knocks massive cluster of genes that you need upregulated. But look at over here, DNA synthesis. So think about repairing your DNA. And down the bottom here, legends, telomere maintenance. So this is slowing down cellular aging, wrinkles and all, joint pain, skin issues, gut issues. So NADPH, anabolic reactions. So testosterone, building your proteins. We've got to make sure this one is upregulated. But this is what's happening for a lot of people. So because the 4 layers are not optimized yet, it's survival first. So you try and repair your gut, you're taking probiotics, this supplement, that supplement. Then you're trying to detox, which is going to backfire. So you're spinning your wheels. But then the detox is burdened. And we're using all these ridiculous detox supplements. And I'm going to show you here today, probably another 10 minutes, that you don't need detox supplements. Your body is innately intelligent and it can do the work. But we've got to get NADPH it back and also the NOx system. And rebuild is the last priority. So let's just have a look at your muscles here. So this is layer 3. So if you've got a healthy layer 3, and we'll talk about what that is somewhere towards the end, all of these 4 layers, this is where your blood flows and it's delivering nutrients to your muscles. So you go to the gym, you train, trigger mTOR, get enough protein, then you're going to heal your muscles very quickly. But over here, what you'll understand is you've lost containment. So instead of inflammation from the lifting, which is beneficial to stay local, a paracrine effect, it's systemic. So it goes into the blood and then it shuts down your testosterone production. So NADPH, again, very underrated molecule. It also powers up this massive cluster of genes called NOx. So they work together. But NOx can get out of control and backfire. So right here, skin and wound healing, tendons, ligaments, and of course, joints, muscle recovery, as I just mentioned. So we're going to have this contained locally, immune resolution, Central nervous system, the enteric nervous system of the gut, central nervous system, spine, motor control, and also your money maker, higher thinking, cognition. And of course, your gut lining, which we're going to dive into today. But this is a big cluster, and it's all driven by NADPH, anabolism. So it's literally rebuilding you. It's done through metabolism. But as you can see there, it's signaling all of these pathways. All of these pathways when it's appropriate. But when it's out of control, it backfires. And longevity genes too, like FOXOs, like all these longevity genes. So the scientific literature is showing now, and it's been showing this for quite some time, that I'm going to start talking about glycosaminoglycans and protein synthesis and sulfation, because that's what this research paper shows. So we got these GAGs, like heparan sulfate, and they are regulators of the inflammation. So they're keeping inflammation local so it doesn't go into the blood and shut down T and muscle repair, but also repair in your body. And also modulating your immune system, chemokines. So the way you want to think through this, we've got to have NADPH. And as we progress, you'll understand why, but you can probably appreciate why now. So this is where the blood flows, the glycocalyx, and it's highly sulfated. And I'm going to show you how to make sure that it is sulfated. So this is local containment, paracrine effect. So you heal very quickly and appropriately, immune resolution very, very fast, versus this systemic drain. So it's going to drain your NADPH. You're going to be producing a lot more reactive oxygen species like superoxide, perinitrite, and everything just slows down. And a lot of people get used to that. So how do we repopulate the most important thing in our body? Well, that's what I believe, the glycocalyx. Well, it's done through mRNA gene expression. So we are making about 20,000 proteins. And these glycosaminoglycans, that's part of the story. So in the DNA, you make mRNA. So that then goes to what's called the ribosome in the rough endoplasmic reticulum, and it starts to work its magic. Then it's transported out of the rough into the Golgi, and it works more magic on it. And then it's finally packaged up, as you can see here, and it's delivered through the endothelium into the glycocalyx. And it can do this every 2 to 3 hours. And it's all dependent on NADPH and ATP availability. But what you could probably appreciate now is if this inflammation isn't contained, it's going to shut down your T. So every 2 hours, free T comes out to rebuild your muscles and also go into your moneymaker, your brain, to lower anxiety and fear and replace it with motivation, enthusiasm, courage to get out there and kick ass. So we've got to have it all contained locally. So the big overview here, we need NADPH and containment, because when it's over here, that inflammation goes into the blood, the brain sees it, too much inflammation, and it shuts down testosterone production to repair your muscles. But when we got it contained over here, we go to the gym, we focus on active recovery, and testosterone is pulsed out every couple of hours to rebuild your muscles. But over here, it's kind of sporadic. So that's the big takeaway that I want you to get right now. So here are the 4 layers. Layers 1 is all about redox, glutathione, NADPH, and also detox, liver, kidneys, and through the stool. Layer 2 is all about proteostasis, and this is a quality control check of all your proteins. And once we fix those 2 layers, that's when you're going to have a healthy gut and also endothelial and epithelial cells. And that's when you can really start to repair and rebuild yourself, literally from the inside out. When I learned all about sulfation, my first introduction was from this lady here, Stephanie Seneff. She's a senior research scientist at MIT. She's got a PhD and a bachelor's in biochemistry. And as she says, and I've got on screen there, sulfation, my friends, is essential for maintaining a healthy barrier in your blood vessels and also your epithelial cells of your gut. And she goes on to say heparan sulfate is one of the most abundant glycosaminoglycans. Chondroitin sulfate is another one, really important for joint health. That forms the glycocalyx, a structured fourth phase. Then, of course, the final thing here, basically, in other words, as she says, if glycosaminoglycans are insufficiently sulfated, we're in trouble. So I paid attention when I read that. So I'm going to talk about the sulfation engine room and what you need to do. And we've got a limited supply every day, a sulfation tank that we need to make sure we've got plenty of. And we'll talk about that as we progress. Now, gut health. Yes, it's a glycosaminoglycan, mucin story, protein synthesis story, layer 3. So if layer 1 is optimal, NADPH, glutathione, ATP, and then of course layer 2, the quality control check, and I'll talk about that in probably 3 or 4 slides from now, what you need to do there, proteostasis. Then we're going to work our way back to this healthy gut here. So you got the mucins here, which is a big glycosaminoglycan, protein synthesis story. Then this is the glycocalyx. It's highly sulfated. Then this is the epithelial cells in there. They're actually making these glycosaminoglycans and that mucin barrier there. But you see here, these tight junctions, that's a protein. The anchors to the extracellular matrix, that's a protein. And there's lots of collagen in there and also glycosaminoglycans. For a lot of people, they're kind of over here. So they've got a little bit of systemic inflammation. So the tight junctions, they open up a little bit. Food particles, antigens get through. A bit of systemic inflammation. You feel a bit tired and fatigued, and you don't repair and recover from the gym. But also wounds and things like that. But God forbid you're over here with things like colitis and irritable bowel disease. So what we want to fully appreciate is what we truly want is what you see on screen there. We want this whole system operating very, very efficiently. Now, a lot of people do have pathogenic bacteria, and H. pylori is the example I'm using right now, but there's other pathogenic bacteria. So when it's a bit degraded, they actually bury in and they eat the mucin layer. And I won't talk about this side over there because you get the idea. That's severe gut health. But a lot of people are over here. So they're eating the mucin layer. The glycocalyx is not being sulfated optimally, and it's a bit thin. So we have some issues. And to make matters worse, when that's continually going on, this is when this NOx fires up. So it's trying to kill the pathogenic bacteria. And you're in this constant loop of activation of this NOx. So it's degrading the mucin layer, and it's not allowing you to rebuild it. The mucin layer, the glycosaminoglycans, and you can't really sulfate it. So if you've got a lot of issues with this, it's layer 1, layer 2, then rebuild layer 3. Now, I'm just going to play a video for you here. This is Dr. Daddis. He's got a PhD, DHSC, DC, MS, MMSC, FACN. Decades of research. And when I went through and did his training, this is about food sensitivities. Now, the whole goal is to get here, a very healthy barrier. So all these antigens, they really can't get through. The pathogenic bacteria, they can't bury into here and eat the mucin layer. You get the idea. So listen to this. This is pretty cool.
That happens because there's already some inflammation in that tissue, and then the food sensitivities make it worse. Now, if all the joints in the body start to get swollen when there's exposure to a food sensitivity, that's more likely a person that's heading towards rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune issue. Another really common symptom with people that have food sensitivities is just chronic muscle tightness and muscle pain. And we know that the systemic inflammatory response that takes place with delayed food responses can actually increase inflammation in muscles. So a lot of people have chronic muscle pain when they have food sensitivity issues. They're constantly needing someone to work on them, massage them. They're constantly having to move their neck around. They have to go into a jacuzzi all the time or take a hot shower just to relieve some of that inflammation. Lots of diverse gastrointestinal symptoms, whether it's changes in bowel movements, just stomach pain, ulcer-like reflux symptoms, just pain and cramping in the abdomen. All types of diverse GI symptoms can be triggered by food sensitivity. I mean, the immune system, majority of the immune system is in the gut. So when there's dietary proteins triggering the inflammatory response, it can really cause dysfunction all throughout the GI tract, everything from the stomach all the way down to the colon. Another common response with food sensitivity is just swelling throughout the body. So some people notice when they eat foods, they start to get really swollen. They may have a hard time identifying what it is when it's a food sensitivity because the reaction can be delayed. And then another one is fatigue. Food sensitivities with people is they just lose their energy. They just get tired all the time and they don't know why. And they're really frustrated by that. So systemic inflammation can actually uncouple what are called mitochondria in cells, which are used to make energy. So chronic inflammation can reduces their production of ATP, which is energy. Many people get just this weird type of tiredness and fatigue when they have food sensitivities. Another major one is change in their cognitive functions. They get brain fog all the time. They can't think. They can't focus. They have some concentration issues. Those are not uncommon when people have food sensitivities. Lots of studies now linked inflammation in the gut with inflammation in the brain. These are through the vagus nerve. These are through different inflammatory mediators through the blood, through circulation. But we know when people start to have inflammatory changes in their gut from foods they eat, there's definitely inflammatory changes in the brain. And when there's inflammation in the brain, synapses don't happen as effectively, as efficiently, and many people end up with loss of function, including memory. And they get to the point where people start to get mood disorders, and we know that.
So what that really is, basically over here, so we've got a chronic activation of this NOx. Now, just to refresh your memory there, NOx is beneficial when it's transient and appropriate. Skin and wounds, tendons, ligaments, joints, muscle recovery, immune resolution, nervous system, and the gut lining, of course. So when NOx is chronically activated because you got some issues in your gut, you can't really rebuild and repair your gut. It's a protein synthesis story. So these yeast that some people have, and a lot of people do have yeast infections, they're very tough to get rid of because they've got a very thick wall that NOx needs to destroy and kill them. And also biofilm clusters as well. Pathogenic bacteria like H. pylori as well. So you got this chronic activation of NOx and INOS. So you're just in this constant loop of activation after activation after activation. So let's talk about layer 2. So this is proteostasis, which is a quality control check in your body for proteins. And we're making 20,000 proteins. This is huge, proteostasis. So when we've got layer 1 back, we can start to work on the quality control check. And I'm going to show you exactly what you need to do here. Because when our gut's a bit sick, we're edging towards serious gut issues. So you could have nutrient deficiencies, and that's what layer 1 is all about. And we'll talk about that towards the end. But again, you could have DNA damage, not very helpful, oxidative damage, protein misfolding, and proteostasis defects. This is one and the same, plus mitochondrial issues. So I won't drive into the rest of it there. But what does proteostasis actually mean? Well, it's hunting the body for misfolded proteins, but also proteins that need to be replaced. That's the big idea. So proteostasis, towards the end, I'll show you how to get this right. But as you can see, it's not just the gut or the epithelial cells or the endothelial cells. It's also your moneymaker, your brain. So as these studies have shown over and over again, protein misfolding aggregation in the brain, common pathogenic pathways in neurodegenerative diseases and mental disorders. So endoplasmic reticulum stress and these misfolded proteins just keep going up and up and up. Now, the most important thing you want to take away from this is that you need to make sure your fasting insulin is ideal. And I'm going to talk about where your fasting insulin needs to be. Because when you've got chronically elevated fasting insulin, you can't engage in autophagy, as you can see here, but it also is causing inflammation. And misfolded protein can't be eliminated. You go into energy storage, which means you pack it on the fat. So not an ideal situation whatsoever. But it also impedes your ability to get lean as well. This is Professor Ben Bickman. Check it out.
Now, I am a scientist enough that I like to avoid hyperbolic language. I don't want to state anything in the extreme. And yet, in this case, I actually can. I can revel in all of the power of this declaration, which is you simply wipe out a person's insulin, it is completely impossible for them to get fat. In fact, this phenomenon is so real and so learned, if not already known, that you have people with type 1 diabetes. Imagine the temptation. Let's say you're a young woman who faces more pressure than her young men counterparts. She just gets diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and she has become used to eating whatever she wants and being very, very skinny. That is one of the cardinal signs of type 1 diabetes. The person is just losing weight. In fact,
So as you can see there, lots of benefits to getting your insulin, right? Because this is proteostasis right here. So it's a quality control check for you. As I mentioned, 20,000 proteins. So these proteins are in the testosterone synthesis pathway, the detox pathway. They're in all metabolic pathways. We need a quality control check. And we also need an efficient way to make new proteins. Now, just back over here, you see when you got your fasting insulin chronically elevated, you got ER stress, which is endoplasmic reticulum stress. So when your body senses it needs a brand new protein, whatever of the 20,000 proteins it needs, it signals DNA to make messenger RNA. That makes its way to the rough endoplasmic reticulum. So you can kind of see how chronic high insulin is. And then because you start to try and fold these proteins, and it's estimated that between 10 and 20% of the proteins that we're making are misfolded proteins, right? The body makes errors. So they are tagged with chaperone proteins, ubiquinol, and it's tagged for autophagy over here. So if your fasting insulin is too high, this doesn't happen. So you're delivering the proteins out to where they needed. So you're sorting and delivering, whether that's to the tight junctions in your gut, the mucin layer, the glycocalyx, collagen, transporters for vitamins and minerals, or transporters for hormones like testosterone. That's how important this proteostasis system is. It's a quality control check of your 20,000 proteins. So just an example here of how your glycocalyx makes brand new glycosaminoglycans. So your body says, we need to repopulate the glycocalyx and sulfate it. So step number one in the DNA, messenger RNA, goes into the rough endoplasmic reticulum, and on the rough, they got these ribosomes, and that's why they call it rough. It starts to work its magic. The misfolded proteins are tagged for autophagy, cellular cleansing. But the good ones are sent into the Golgi apparatus, then they're packaged up, as you can see here, through the epithelial cells into the glycocalyx. Boom. Inflammation is localized, so wound healing, muscle recovery, everything comes back online. And again, you need NADPH. This NADPH, layer 1, needs to be optimal for this to happen. And sulfation, as I mentioned, somewhere towards the end, I'm going to talk about the sulfation engine room, because if they're not sulfated, as I mentioned earlier here, Stephanie Seneff, basically, if glycosaminoglycans, that's the glycocalyx, are insufficiently sulfated, we're in trouble. So that's the bottom line. So we also got to make sure that it is sulfated. Now we're going to switch gears into layer 1. So ATP, NADPH, glutathione, and biotransformations. That's taking toxins in the liver, kidneys, and getting rid of them, pissing them out, or, through the stools, getting rid of them as well. So you want to think of, so these are the proteins that our V8 engine is making. Quality control check, proteostasis. So think of the pistons as making the proteins, but we need something else to make these proteins. We need vitamins and minerals because they are the spark plug. You see, some proteins need one vitamin or mineral, and some need many vitamins and minerals. And as soon as the vitamins and minerals comes down, we ration them out and rebuild projects, testosterone, detox, it all powers down. So Layer one is about optimal vitamins and minerals and getting our redox back. So let's talk about the issues with some of the processes and metabolic systems in our body. Now, I'm going to come to this slide in a moment because the mitochondria are producing your energy and they need a lot, and I mean a lot, of vitamins and minerals. But it can also be an issue with genes as well. You see, there's a gene called SOD2, and it's inside the mitochondria, and that's taking something nasty and turning into harmless H2O, water. But if you've got an issue with SOD2 genetically, well, I'll just play this video for you. This is Dr. J. I've been working with Dr. J since 2020, and he's just talking about this one gene.
Heart disease. Yeah. So this one gene, there's really the two genes here, but the SOD2 gene is not a risk unless her ferritin is high. But if her ferritin is high, this gene gives her a 10-fold higher risk of heart disease, which is super high risk.
10-fold, yeah.
We want that to be 0-fold. So you got to make sure the ferritin is between 50 and 100, not just 50 to 500 or some kind of crazy nonsense.
Yeah.
It has to be optimal, not just normal.
So that one thing alone, ferritin, how do you fix that? Well, you donate blood. You do a lab, where's your ferritin? Too high? Donate, really simple. Now, inside the mitochondria, let me just grab another color pen here. And that color will do. All right. So this is the mitochondria, and this is getting back to ferritin. So when we breathe, it's estimated that about anywhere from about 40 to 70% of this superoxide is created in the mitochondria. So that's a problem. It's really bad because it can non-enzymatically react with nitric oxide and turn into one of the most toxic metabolites known to biology, perinitrite. So that's a big problem. So the body has an elegant way of fixing that. Superoxide dismutase 2. Let me just increase the pen size here. So this is it here, SOD2. Now, for this to work, it needs a mineral, which is manganese. So manganese binds to it like a spark plug does and allows it to work. Now, this is a red cell check, and you can see here the manganese is low. So not really taking care of that superoxide. So that's problem one. Now, problem two is superoxide dismutase turns into hydrogen peroxide. So we still got to fix that because we're not done yet. This is where catalase, glutathione work their magic on it. This is getting back to NADPH. This is an NADPH system, and it turns into harmless H2O. So when we've got optimal cofactors, spark plugs to these proteins, then no problem. But there's another one inside the mitochondria called SOD1, and it needs copper and zinc as well. But as you can see here, if they're suboptimal, you're not really taking care of that superoxide. So what happens if that is the case? So inside the mitochondria, that superoxide doesn't get taken care of, so it busts through the mitochondria. That's problem one. And problem two, it can also bust through the plasma membrane out into the glycocalyx where the blood flows. And it can non-enzymatically react with nitric oxide and turn into perinitrite, and it starts to degrade the precious protective shield, the glycocalyx. So this is kind of the representation that I want you to take home there. Now over here, if we got optimal cofactor status, we can take care of that superoxide, no problem. But as I've looked through the scientific literature, this is exactly what I'm talking about. So this is the manganese SOD, so superoxide dismutase. Check it out. Brain issues. So you don't want your brain tapping out. And of course, your lungs, asthma, things like that, the liver, pancreas, your joints, multi-organ, your skin. So wrinkles and sagging skin and dark spots, your intestines and gut is nuked, your kidneys, but also plaque in your arteries. Well, it makes perfect sense because if the glycocalyx is degraded, you don't have a protective shield. And sulfation goes to the floor. And the same is true with gut health. So we need NADPH and optimal cofactors to rebuild the gut. And it's turned over every 2 to 3 days. So you can think about these antigens and pathogenic bacteria. They really can't get through. They can't bury themselves in there and start eating up the protective mucin layer. And then you've also got the epithelial cell glycocalyx, and that's a protein synthesis story. So we've got to make sure that proteostasis is online, optimal vitamins and minerals, good redox, NADPH. Then your epithelial cells, they're in there making the glycosaminoglycans and the mucin. It's a gigantic protein, glycoprotein. And it's also making the tight junctions to keep the tight junctions so nothing gets through. Then you've also got these anchors to the extracellular matrix, and that's full of collagen. Then you can see the blood supply there. And again, the blood supply, glycosaminoglycans, sulfated glycosaminoglycans. And right down the bottom there, you've got a immune surveillance. If anything gets through, it's going to take it out. So if that is your gut, you're pretty protected. So that's how I want you to start thinking through it. So you've got zone 1 there, the gut barrier, but you've also got the glycocalyx, the blood-brain barrier. So it's enhancing everything. Proteostasis, NADPH, redox, cofactor status. It helps you rebuild yourself literally from the inside out. So layer 1 is all about redox, NADPH, glutathione, biotransformation, liver, kidneys, detox, and mitochondria. So when we've got all of that right, you can start to optimize layer 1, which will start to optimize layer 2, proteostasis. Now, insulin. Get your fasting insulin checked. Ideally, between 2 and 5. Fasting insulin between 2 and 5. When it's about 8 or greater, all of these systems start to suffer, and you start to suffer. And of course, fat loss. So you remember Ben Bickman there, so you probably want to get lean pretty quickly. We've already played that video. But as you can see there, it's a protein synthesis story. We're making around about 20,000 proteins, and they're eventually delivered out to the areas that need them, like the tight junctions, the glycocalyx, collagen, and your enzymes and receptors, testosterone receptors, vitamin and mineral receptors. So the vitamins actually get into the cell where they're needed. So eventually, when you get all these 3 layers worked out, layer 4, you can train in the gym, but you can also repair joints, ligaments, and tendons. But if you're over here, can you see the problem? We can't really adapt from training. And if you got any chronic issues like knee issues, we can't really repair them. Because again, as you can see here, you're making this gigantic glycoprotein, proteoglycan called aggrecan. So this is the hyaluron backbone there, and these are the glycosaminoglycans, and they're sulfated. So this is a protein synthesis and sulfation story. So when that is optimal, it acts like a shock absorber and a lubricant. But as this system starts to fail, you get a bit of cracking and I guess knee problems, but eventually you're going to be going to your doctor and get a knee replacement. So it's a rebuild, literally from the inside out, layer 1, 2, and 3. And then, of course, you can start to optimize rebuilding in your body. Now, this is a place where you want to get to. So this is the layer of command. Endothelial and epithelial glycocalyx, sulfation capacity, and the quality control check of the 20,000 proteins you're making. Everything starts to come back online, legends. Now, what I'm going to talk about on the next video next week is detox, because if you're not detoxing, you can't heal your gut, and all of these layers won't work properly. So if you like the videos that I'm making for you, consider subscribing and hitting that notification, so when I put out these new videos, you'll get a notification that they're out. So we discussed layer 1. Now, I just really want to touch on sulfation there. So sulfation and the glycosaminoglycans, everything I've talked about. You've got nutrient petitioning, you've got muscle recovery, and also enhanced lipolysis, fat loss. And of course, you know, all the tight junctions, the collagen, and also hormone signaling. So we're making proteins for hormone signaling. And of course, the blood-brain barrier integrity. So layer 1, it's all about cofactors, biotransformation, liver detox, which I'll be discussing next week, NADPH, the anabolic reactions in your body, testosterone, growth and healing in the body, muscle building, fat loss. And layer two is a quality control check. I mean, we've got proteins in our body that we need to get rid of the dysfunctional ones, right? Fasting insulin between 2 and 5, and make brand new ones expeditiously. And that's when layer three comes in line. You start rebuilding your gut, your knee joints, all the barriers in you, and you really start to thrive. So in a nutshell, you could be here or here. It doesn't matter where you are. It just might take a bit longer to get back over here after you go down these layers. Now, step number one, the foundation is the circadian rhythm, because it's switching on your hormones. It's also providing you deep restorative sleep, so you actually get sleep pressure and sleep deeply. It's in control of digestion. That is huge. Recovery and longevity genes. So the circadian rhythm, it's triggering these B-male clock cells to switch on everything in the morning. We're talking about proteostasis and autophagy. We're talking about brand new mitochondria, cellular senescence. So we talked about the telomeres, accelerated aging, skin cells, all of them. So if you don't pay attention to the circadian rhythm, you age faster. And I mean, proteostasis, you want to be checking your proteins each and every day and replacing the bad ones. And the longer you put this off, the harder it is for you to become optimized. That really is the bottom line. So layer two, the proteostasis system quality control check. And yeah, circadian rhythm switches it on. It switches it on. And it also switches on your mitochondria. And the mitochondria are a necessary step to make your neurotransmitters, your hormones, testosterone, thyroid, repair RNA, DNA, lipids. So your body fat goes into a process called beta oxidization, and you burn body fat. And also, protein synthesis, homeostatic balance. But over here, it's a communication hub as well, the mitochondria. So they're speaking to different organs in your body, central nervous system and the enteric nervous system of the gut, intestines and your microbiome, circadian rhythm, metabolic systems and your immune system. And it's also in charge of gene expression and epigenetic pathways and cell fate. So cell fate is accelerated aging. Now, if your circadian rhythm isn't on point, you miss out on melatonin. Now, melatonin, number one, pineal melatonin for sleep, but you've also got daytime melatonin. That's right. You're making melatonin within the mitochondria throughout the day when your circadian rhythm is on point. So in the mitochondria here, acetyl-CoA, 5-HT, melatonin, and look what melatonin does. Nighttime and daytime. So the mitochondria use melatonin within the mitochondria to provide you all of these benefits. So neuroinflammation down, healthy cholesterol, your cholinergic system, which is rest and digest, higher thinking, ACTH, neurogenesis goes up, and so telomere attrition, anti-aging, senescent cells, mitochondrial dysfunction down, so during the day, and then homeostatic balance of calcium, which is huge. And I'm not going to drive into why that's huge, but it is absolutely huge. And healthy insulin, so getting your insulin down, melatonin, and also these terrible misfolded proteins, tau plaques, and beta amyloids. Now, the mitochondria need lots of vitamins and minerals. Sulfation, step number one. Light, UVB, UVA, triggers the whole sulfation pathway, the PAPS pathway, sulfate transferases. Number two, shear stress on the glycocalyx. So when the glycocalyx is healthy, you're going to be making a lot of sulfated glycosaminoglycans glycans to make that protective barriers you see here very, very healthy. So HIIT cardio and also weight training, best ones there. And of course, mental stress. But what you'll find is when you get your testosterone back, you clear the stress out of the body, mindset is pretty easy. Then, of course, NADPH and ATP availability, and your gut barrier and cofactors. They are the spark plugs to these 20,000 proteins that you're making. And sulfation is energy. expensive. You use 2 ATPs to make it. And on the video next week, I'll dive deeper into this. But basically, in a nutshell, you can get your V8 engine back. You can get your testosterone back. You can get it all back. But NADPH, layer 1, as you can see there, it is pretty important. So if you got any questions, drop in the comments below. But if you like what I'm about, consider subscribing. And if you want the fast track path, there's information below to reach out to me. Or you can just stick around and keep listening to these videos I'm putting out, because I'm here to help. I want you to feel how I feel and eventually get to a place where I am, where you're thriving. The V8 engine, you got NADPH, NAD+, protein synthesis and quality control check on. Your gut's repairing. You're making all these proteins efficiently in an expeditious way. So that's basically how you're going to think through it. And it takes a bit of time because it just depends on where you are. Glycosaminoglycans, legends, and it's a protein synthesis story and a proteostasis story. And it's all about getting you your man juice back. But if you're over here, you can't keep that inflammation local, so your pulse generator shut down. But when you get it over here every 2 hours, by default, you're pumping out brand new free T, and you're repairing your muscles. You got the pulses of LH every 2 hours, as I mentioned there before. So everything's recovering very, very efficiently.